Hello, good evening and welcome. My name is Rabbi David Rose, and it is my great pleasure to be with you here this evening and to introduce our special guest speaker, Rabbi Moti Zsolt Balla. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
It's a great honor, Rav David. Thank you so much for having me.
So let me tell you a little bit about our guest speaker. Rabbi Zsolt is currently the rabbi of the Jewish community in Leipzig in Germany, and he has a formidable CV. Hungarian-born, Rabbi Balla is married to Marina, and they have 3 children together. He was ordained at the Hildesheimer Rabbinical Seminary in Berlin and was the first smicha student to be ordained in that institution since its closing before World War II. He is a trained chazan, a cantor, and also heads a school of liturgy in Germany. He is one of the board members of the ORD, which is the Orthodox Rabbinical Council for Jews in Germany. And most recently, he was appointed as the chaplain for the German Armed Forces. Now, I must disclose that Rabbi Balla and I have known each other for many years. We lived together in Berlin before we each went our separate ways. And I must say that I'm very excited, and if I can say proud, to see everything that you have achieved and everything you have done for the Jewish community in Germany. But first of all, Rabbi Zsolt, have I missed anything out from your illustrious CV?
I think it's even too much. Thank you so much for your kind words, Rav David. Thank you.
Well, there's so much to discuss. So why don't we start? Tonight's conversation is entitled German Jewry in 2021, Challenges and Opportunities. So there is so much to discuss there. Why don't we start with the headline grabbing news that you were appointed the chaplain, the rabbi of the German army. Tell us, how did it come about? What is the position and what are your responsibilities?
So this is actually, obviously, it's a much longer story than the way it appears in the news outlets, because in the news outlets, suddenly in May or June, it has been announced the German army has a rabbi. But obviously, it's a much, much longer story. And to be very honest, actually, the story for German Jewry is over 30 years old. More than 30 years, the Central Council of Jews in Germany have been doing their best to implement some sort of Jewish chaplaincy in the Bundeswehr. Now, we also have to take a little bit of a few steps back, because I definitely believe that for many of the listeners and those who view our session here, it might sound very, very, I wouldn't say outrageous, but very, very difficult to hear that there's a need for rabbinate in the German army. We should go back a little bit in history. Obviously, we have a very, very heavy history of the Shoah on our shoulders. But in 1946, Germany has become demilitarized. And 9 years later, in 1955, the federal defense, which is actually the exact translation of the word Bundeswehr, it has been reestablished. Now, it was very, very important that this army should in no way be a continuation of what it was during the World War. Now, to implement that, it's not an easy task, historically and practically speaking. However, they did a lot of efforts to really make this happen. They even established a special unit called the Inner Leadership of the Army, which is stationed in Koblenz, very, very central in Germany, that has basically the task of making sure that the ethical norms and the philosophy that is taught to every single soldier on a continuing basis. Now, there was a mandatory army service in Germany. However, Jews for 2 generations after the Shoah were exempt. So just to give you an example, my mother, who was born in 1942, I'm considered to be the first generation after the Shoah. Even my children, if there would be a mandatory service, would be exempt from that service. Now, obviously, that meant that not many Jews decided to partake in the army service. We have a common friend, Rabbi Rose, Rabbi Danny Fabian, who told me the story when he had to go to the commission at the recruiting at his age, when he was 18, 19, his mother gave him an envelope. And in this, he said that when you come to the commission, you have to present this envelope to the commission. So he comes to the commission, they do all the tests, physical checkup, mental checkup, you're fine. Which section are you interested? Which division are you interested in serving? And he says, here's this envelope. So he hands over the envelope. The commissioner officer opens the envelope, reads it, and says, thank you very much, you're exempt from service. What was in the envelope? It was the liberation paper of Rabbi Fabian's grandmother from Auschwitz. So that was basically back then a simple way. It wasn't just the way out. It was a clear cut. If you are a descendant of a Shoah survivor, you do not go to the army. That was the basics. So there was almost no Jewish presence in the Bundeswehr, in the German army, for many, many years. However, there was a definitely need for ethical education of the soldiers, and here and there, many Jewish not chaplains but rabbis and Jewish educators took part in this ongoing education of the soldiers. Now, in the 1990s, we have the huge influx of the former Soviet Russians in Germany, which is a very different matzav than anyone else. You experienced it as firsthand, Rav David, what that means. These Jews are coming with a very clear Jewish identity because it says in their passports, or sorry, not the passports, but in their birth certificate, nationality Jewish. However, they were definitely not the same way connected to middle or Central European Jewish history. Many of them were not descendants of survivors, but rather children or grandchildren of people who fought in the Red Army. And we shouldn't forget that unlike my family, who after the war, 1945 until 1990, 45 years of so to say vacuum regarding Judaism. They had over 70 years since the Russian socialist revolution. So these Jews, at this slowly but surely, there's already no more boundaries to come to serve in the army, and we already have a certain historical distance from the Shoah. Now, throughout these past decades, the German army did everything in its power to stay on the right side of history, and they complement all their pennants from all the countries. They are there in the front line of all the missions, together with the British Army, together with the American Army, with the French Army, serving in Afghanistan, Jordan, Mali, you name it, all the places where there's a need for peacekeeping. The German soldiers come, and it's very, very clear that this army today stands on the right side of history. Now, I think for us who live in Germany, this is also our responsibility to make sure that this stays this way. So we have to do our share. Now, just also, we speak between each other there as also a little bit like rabbis. What drives me personally in this whole thing is a Torah Temima. Rabbi Khalid Epstein for it's also coming up soon. Parashas Vayishlach. In Parashas Vayishlach, when Yaakov Avinu arrives to Shechem, the Torah says, "Vayichan es bnei ha'ir." He comes and he settles. He encamps opposite the city. But the sages in the Talmud did not really always understand it this way. It says, "Vayichan es bnei ha'ir" means he beautified the city. So the sages in the Gemara come and have a three-way machlokas. What did he do? So one say he implemented a new coin for better economy. The other says he implemented bathhouses. The third one, he says he bought up a marketplace. And the Yerushalmi and the Rabbi Khalid Epstein also quotes this Yerushalmi, where he says that the goal is Hakoras HaToiv. The fact that Yaakov Avinu could live there, it obligates him. From here we learn that every Jew has to do a tikkun for his own place, wherever he finds himself. So for whatever reasons, I ended up in Germany, and actually the reason is, as a Baal Tshuva from Hungary, was actually learning Torah, which was on its own a miracle. So my personal engagement of this whole issue has come through as a part of Hakaras HaTov to the place where I can live today, with all its problems and all its ups and downs, but I'm sure we're going to come to that. So as a board member of the ORD, about 8 years ago, I've been asked to liaise between this inner leadership of the German army and the rabbinate. In this inner leadership of the army, back then there was no rabbinate within the army. They had a central, a center for those soldiers who belonged to other faith groups than Catholic and evangelical Christians. And this central tried to build up the possibility for military chaplaincy for these soldiers, to find somebody who can guide and counsel them in the area of chaplaincy. So I started to be in this dialogue, so to say, about 7 or 8 years ago. And in the same time, the politics that I mentioned over 30 years, that the Jewish communities in Germany trying to build up actually some sort of military chaplaincy, which had some very serious legal boundaries. For example, they required at least 1,800 members of a faith group to install one chaplain. Because of historical reasons, there was no way to have 1,800 Jewish soldiers. That would be 1% of the whole German army, which currently counts around 180,000 soldiers, members, who even civilians. It was almost impossible. So we had to change the law to implement this thing. Now, 2019, because of the very, very strong work of the Central Council of Jews in Germany, the German government decided to implement actually a military rabbinate in the German federal defense. And this is when they started to look for the structures to pave the way legally, how to build the whole thing up. I have to be honest with you, I'm not very well versed in German law. So therefore, very many of the bureaucratic parts, I can only share with you the basics, but not necessarily the nuanced details. But the point is that at some point, maybe because of my previous engagement with the topic, the Central Council of Jews asked me whether I would be willing to take this position. It was not an easy decision because, as you mentioned, I'm a rabbi in Leipzig, in the city of Leipzig. I feel very, very connected to my community, and in no way I would have been ready to leave my community here. So, but it turns out that it was practically possible to do, so to say, 2 part-time jobs. So right now I'm part-time as a federal military rabbi for Germany, and part-time the rabbi of Leipzig, which in truth, I have to be honest with you, it's like 2 full-time jobs. But I'm very, very glad that I did not have to give up my community rabbanus, because otherwise it would have been a very hard decision. I also did not really think of myself as being able to do that. It was a great challenge. Now I have to be honest, after close to 5 months in the position, it's an incredible experience, incredible learning, incredible new world. And I really just hope, that the Kadosh Baruch Hu will give us the strength to Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. This is the as short as I can put the story together to understand the things in context. And I hope you have maybe more detailed questions about some of these.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, based on the idea you shared with us, it certainly seems that you have brought chayin, you've brought beauty to the place where you are. Now, I'm sure a lot of our viewers will want to know just how many Jewish servicemen are there in the German forces?
So I have to be very honest with you. We, as the German military rabbinate, we are very, very careful not to speak about numbers. The reason is because even if there's only 1 soldier, we should be there. That's the basic line. Now, what I'm saying, obviously, it's very hard to say on a live feed off the record. as the government decided to implement the military rabbinic, they assessed the number of Jews in the army about 300 soldiers. For many people, this number seemed a little bit too high. And I have to be very honest with you that at the beginning, I was also a little bit mesupak. I was also myself doubting a little bit the accuracy of the number. However, since I'm in the position, I have the chance to meet new faces weekly. And when on a weekly basis, more and more Jewish soldiers turn to you, or you put on your intraweb website that for Rosh Hashanah and for Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, you're welcoming soldiers who wish to. It was easy for us to do it in Leipzig, whoever wishes to come. And suddenly a young man appears on Shmini Atzeres. He signs up. You never heard of him. He's coming from a small town. Turns out his maternal grandmother was in a DP camp. She was a Polish Jew who stayed here after the war, and he in the recent years got acquainted to his Jewish roots. He went to a Taglit trip, and he's, by the way, serving as a mechanic in the German Air Force. And a fantastic young man, and just popping up at your door, and you're happy to see that there's something that you can give, actually. And there are stories like that since we are here. I myself, therefore, right now, I really think, especially if you count in that number all the descendants of those who immigrated here in the past 25, 30 years, the number of 300 is not unrealistic. But I'm still very, very careful because we do not have exact numbers. There's no obligation for the soldiers to tell their faith when they enroll to the army.
So you've clearly had some interaction with some of these servicemen and women. What sort of things do they approach you with?
So for now, they are happy with the fact that there is actually some Jewish chaplaincy. So we had a great meeting with there is actually a union of Jewish soldiers in Germany, and we're trying to reactivate this organization. And we had a joint meeting where they beautifully presented us a list of what they wish, including Sidurim, including different support, what we as Jewish chaplaincy could provide them. And we have that list, and we are trying to work on it. It's going to be wonderful. However, at the same time, I have to tell you also that there are also soldiers who approached us with the fact that they have issues in their troops. Issues of anti-Semitism, which is obviously, how to say that, Rav David, you're a real Lamdan. I think here we have to be also a little bit Lamdan, and I'm telling this as a Hungarian Jew. I'd rather come from a place where people say that we have problems than to come from a country that says we have no problem with anti-Semitism. Every now and then, there's a story of anti-Semitism in Germany and anti-Semitism in the troops within the Bundeswehr. If there would be no such news, I would be much more worried. That's the truth, because it's so to say it's a must that in countries where there is a optional army service, that means no obligatory enrollment in the army, people who will willingly serve in the army are generally more open to ideology on the right. They're more exploitable, God forbid, for radical political views. That means in every single army where the people serve by choice, you have problem of right radicalism, without exception. That holds true for all the NATO countries. If this is if there's there are no news about bad things happening in your country, that makes me worried, because that means there are certain problems that are just simply brushed under the rug and swept under the rug instead of speaking about it. So therefore, it is very, very troubling to have cases of anti-Semitism, but at the same time, I'm glad that we are speaking about it. And it's especially in the higher levels in the army, it's an issue. They know that we have a problem. We have to do something against it, and we have to deal with it. Yeah, this is so there are very different ways that we are approached.
Now we are on the topic of anti-Semitism. This is something that obviously comes up in any conversation about Jewish life in Germany. What are your impressions of anti-Semitism generally in German society? And you were talking about the threat from the right. Would you say it's exclusively from the right, from the left? What do you think the main threats are today?
I think one of the biggest threats that we have is to try to think of things in a local way and not in a global way. I might be wrong. I'm not an expert on anti-Semitism. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a historian. But according to my personal experience and personal opinion, there is no less anti-Semitism in the UK than in Germany. And there is no more anti-Semitism, no less anti-Semitism in Germany than in the United States, all over the world. The world is globalizing. Certain tendencies, especially now with the crazy spreading of conspiracy theories throughout the pandemic, it's just we should be very, very worried about this situation. These are not anymore local problems. These are global problems. The UK might be out of the EU, but you're still not detached from the Western world. You have the same issues. Everybody has the same issues. And I don't think it's higher or less. The only and it comes from the right and from the left and from right radicals. And this is the way anti-Semitism works. It's not different in Germany than in any other country. The higher numbers of incidents is, according to, again, my humble opinion, is the higher number of being reported. But it's not that it's less. As a Hungarian Jew, it sounds funny that I've been never called a dirty Jew on the streets of Germany, even though I go in a kippah. What I was called a dirty Jew in the streets of Budapest. I have I'm sorry?
Sorry to interrupt you there. I think that's a good opportunity maybe to go step back a little bit and leave anti-Semitism for now. As we mentioned, your background is from Hungary. You were brought up in Budapest. Tell us a little about yourself and your Jewish upbringing. I think there's a little bit that we can delve into over there.
Before I go into the story, I just want to tell you to make sure that it's not a unique story. There are thousands of stories like this from Hungary. I'm coming from, so to say, lucky mixed marriages. My father, of blessed memory, he was not Jewish. My mother, she is Jewish. And they were both coming from a strong atheist background back in the days. My grandparents left Yiddishkeit after the Shoah. That was definitely a case, and they have become believing socialists. They believe that this is the way the world will be a better place and to recover from the horrors of the Shoah. My grandmother and my mother for over a year were in a protected Raoul Wallenberg house. You might have heard the name, a Swedish diplomat who provided for over 11,000 Jews Swedish diplomatic protection. So I was born in 1979. I did not know I was Jewish at all in my first few years of life. How did I find out about it? My grandparents grandparents who were always living very, very close to us in Budapest, and my mother and my father as well. They were always pro learning and education. So my grandfather, I still remember, he says, whatever you have here is something that nobody can take away from you. Whatever you have in material wealth, everybody can take away from you with just one signature. I did not know what he meant, but he had his personal life experiences. So whenever I wanted to read, my parents supported whatever it was. And my favorite book, as it turns out, was the Bible. I loved the stories. When I say Bible, I mean the extended version, to be polite. I really enjoyed the stories of all the facets. And when in 1988, the synagogues and the churches started to open up their doors because people understood that this era is soon going to be over, there was a sign in my school that a local Catholic church has Sunday school for Bible classes. So I went to my mom and asked, well, I really want to learn more about it. Can I go? And she said, well, we need to talk. And she told me that I'm Jewish. I even have a Hebrew name. Turns out that what I thought was just a medical necessity was actually done by a Moel, later on the secretary of the Orthodox community in Budapest. And my mother's whole family, everybody's Jewish. My mother is a Bas Levi. Now I find out that she's a Bas Levi. All the stories that I love, it's just fascinating that it's the same. So this is when I started to be fascinated with Judaism, and my mother said that my mother had through my grandfather's brother-in-law, who was a chazan in one of the shuls in Budapest. He arranged me to go to Sunday school, to shul, and where we had an excellent educator, Rabbi Tamas Sharai, who, even though he was a Neolog rabbi, he was very, very fascinated and engaging us to make sure that we learn about these things. And this was also the years when the Ronald S. Lauder Foundation appeared. There's Rabbi David, you know that for me that foundation played a very important role in my life, actually from the age of 12 until now, so the past 30 years. So at the age of 12, I went to their school, and throughout my years in high school, I'm sorry. I apologize. From the age of 17 until 22 were those years that I decided that what I know about Judaism, I would like to also live it. So it was partially in high school and partially the Jewish summer camp of the Lauder Foundation and the Joint Distribution Committee. And when in 2002 I finished my master's in Budapest in engineering and management, my good friend, who was the son-in-law of Dr. George Ban, who was back then the executive vice president of the Ronald S. Lauder Foundation, said to me that maybe you want to go to visit this yeshiva in Berlin. And a yeshiva in Berlin, first of all, why would I go to a yeshiva? It's an Orthodox institution. I have nothing to do with that. But he said, well, my father-in-law is asking me that I have to show at least one person I send there. So please go at least spend the Shabbos there. So this Shabbos was about 19.5 years ago when I came to Berlin. And first time in my life, I was exposed to real Orthodox Judaism, not just a small segment, a closed world, but to understood how relevant it is. And I decided to come to yeshiva, and I spent 2 years learning full-time in Berlin, thanks to the generous support of Rabbi Joshua Spinner and the Lauder Foundation, and then spent a year in Eretz Yisrael in Yeshivas Midrash Shmuel, which was also a very amazing experience. And then I came back for the reopening of the Hildesheimer Rabbinical Seminary, because after 2 years, it was very clear for me that I will not go back to engineering, but rather like to use my management knowledge for Jewish education management or something like that. I actually never dreamt of a pulpit, but then I was convinced that you have to show your credentials also, that you have the Jewish knowledge. How do you do that? You have to obtain a smicha. So Rabbi Spinner, under the guidance of Diana Ehrentreu, may he have a refuah shlema, institute, established this institution where I was zoiche to get a smicha in 2009. And throughout these years, I also got to know my wife, who was brought up in Leipzig. She was 13 when they moved here from the former Soviet Union. And she was one of those excellent young people who really tried to revitalize Jewish life here in the city of Leipzig. And so through our programs and through the Reichat Chanim, we met and we married in 2007. Rav David, you were one of the 80 on the Ksuba. I still remember, yes. Yes, and in 2009, when I got the smicha, we started serving the Jewish community here as well as a visiting rabbi for a year. But after a year, I actually realized that having a community Rabbanos is actually something very. It has its incredible sides of working with people that I very much enjoyed. And in 2010, we moved here to the city, and since 2009, I've been serving the Jewish community here. In 2010, we've been also living here, and in 2019, when the other two cities in Saxony, for a while, didn't have their rabbonim, I was elected also as a rabbi of the state of Saxony, but which is much more of a representative role, some official functions towards the state of Saxony. And this is the short story of how I ended up here.
So, wow. So first of all, we have something we missed off the CV. You're also the Landesrabbiner, the whole regional rabbi of that area. So that's something we have to fill in as well. Secondly, your wife is at home, so she must be delighted that of all the places where you could end up being a rabbi, you ended up in her hometown or her adopted hometown. So tell us a little bit about Leipzig. What sort of size community is it? Where do the people come from? What sort of activities do you involve yourself with your congregants?
Leipzig is a fascinating city. It's really a beautiful city. The Jewish community in 1990 was almost non-existent. There were 25 Jewish souls in the whole city in 1990. There's an art scroll book called Lest We Forget by Rabbi Shlomo Warman of Blessed Zatzal, who was a Yid from Leipzig, and he ended up in New York. And he wrote in the book that in 1989, as he visited the city, there were 36 Jewish people living in the city, and practically Leipzig had become Judenfrei. It was a flourishing Jewish city. If you open the Chai Adam in his Hagdama, he speaks about, literally in the first page, he tells about how Torah learning is like coming to the big Jewry, to the fair of Leipzig. 18,000 Jews lived here in this vibrant city, and it's in its peak in the 30s. And 14,000 have been deported to Theresienstadt, and then later on to other death camps. And only a few hundred returned, and even them, they tried to do their best to leave after Leipzig has gone under Soviet control. So 1990, 25 souls, and then the community comes together once a year on a Pesach night in a non-kosher restaurant. And maybe for the high holidays, they brought in somebody from the Budapest Rabbinical Seminary, the only place in the Eastern Bloc countries where there was some sort of rabbinical training. And then suddenly, out of the blue, under the Kohl era, the Jews start flowing in from the former Soviet Union. And it was a cultural shock for the Jews here as well, that out of the blue, 25 Jews get another 1,300 who have to be integrated in the 25. Obviously, as you can imagine, the incredible tension. These Jews who came here from the former Soviet Union, they wanted Yiddishkeit. I just remember my wife's grandfather, Zichron Livracha, who unfortunately passed away before our wedding. My wife's grandmother used to tell the stories of how he was just standing outside and walking to synagogue, like, I can finally freely live as a Jew, which is really amazing to live that in Leipzig. And there were people who said they were knocking on the doors of the shulas, like, we want here Yiddishkeit. So that changed a lot in the profile. Now, you needed, obviously, the right people and the right foundations. And the Lauder Foundation, as I mentioned to you, was very active here in this region. And they started to support the youth center. Then in 2006, I'm speaking to London through the incredible support of the Rogozhnitsky family, in the memory of one of the last Dayanim of the city, Rabbi Moshe Eliyahu Rogozhnitsky Zatzal. They donated us a Sefer Torah, and they started to support our Kirov Center, our Torah Center, which was run under the umbrella of the Lauder Foundation, and it still keeps on going on. So we have very, very strong program for young adults and students. This also, by the way, created, I wouldn't say problems, but the Greek mythology has this figure of Sisyphus. Whenever a guy who's destined to push up a stone on the hill, and when at the moment he reaches the top of the hill, the stone rolls back to the bottom, and he's obligated to do it again. So we ourselves live that in Leipzig. We try to inspire young people to keep Yiddishkeit, to come closer to observant Judaism. But at the moment we manage that, Leipzig suddenly becomes too small, and there is a need for more infrastructure, more education, more yeshiva world, more kosher restaurants, and this is something that we are way too small to provide. We
mentioned your family. You have a young family. Tell us. You mentioned that people, they have to move away, they have to move on for more opportunities. How old are your kids, and what do you do for them and their education?
We have a 13-year-old daughter, we have a 10-year-old daughter, and we have a 6-year-old son. And this is a very, very challenging thing. We both come from worlds, my wife and I, we were not attending from schools in our youth years. And we do not know what is the right answer, because somehow we both feel, I got what I'm telling you now, I also got from the Rosh Yeshiva of Medrash Shmuel Rabbi Binyamin Moskovich. I presented to him once that I feel like it's not right for me to leave the community just for these needs. And he presented me a brisker tradition on the Parshas Mishpatim that says, Im amaya iman ha'eved, if the slave says, Ahavti es Adoni, I love my master, es ishti, my wife, ve'es bonai, and my children, lo eitzechoshi, he does not go free. So according to the brisker tradition, Ahavti es Adoni, I love my master, I love the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Es ishti, I love my wife, I love the Torah that he gave us. Ve'es bonai, and the people who I took responsibility for, my community members. Lo yitzei, you cannot just go and leave. And this is very, very tough. Thank God Leipzig and Berlin are not too far from each other. So we decided to try to keep our children as long as possible at home until those years come where certain issues become really, really strong. According to our assessment, this is the age of 12, 13. So our daughter, the oldest daughter, she goes to Berlin to Torah observant school. It's not an easy thing to do, but Leipzig and Berlin is just 1 hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes from main train station to main train station. And currently I bring her Monday morning. She sleeps overnight at the family in Berlin, and I pick her up on Fridays and bring her home. This is a very, very tough call, but if we were to move, that means we deliver a message to our community that this is not doable. So we're trying to make it work, and this is the way we deal with the problem.
Well, and you imbue into your children, no doubt, this sense of responsibility to your community, and this sense of how important it is, the work that you're doing with the community there. And I'm sure they very much feel that.
We certainly hope so. This is we are part of the community. It's very important that our family should not be in any way, we're part. It's really amazing that the young families who are here, the young Torah observant families, this is actually our best friends and my wife's circle of friends who inspired one another in their youth to become more observant. So
if we can, in a few minutes we've got left, just a few other things I'd like to bring up that may be of interest to our viewers. Firstly, it seems that we're coming to the end of the Merkel era. Exactly when it will end, we don't know, but we know she's been a strong friend of the Jewish community and of Israel, the state of Israel. What is the future? We hear about this new political party, Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for Germany, and how they've entered into the mainstream. What can you tell us about the makeup of the German parliament and these new influences and what sort of danger you feel they pose to the Jewish community going forward?
So again, I'm not a politician, I'm not a historian, but generally speaking, I'm very, very pleased in Germany that the dynamic and the dominant parties who are all towards the middle left, middle right, middle liberal. That means everything is central, nothing is too extreme. There are some minor voices in the extreme right and extreme left, but it's very, very clear that they're not going to be part of any government bodies, which is very comforting right now. Unfortunately, in the region where I am, in East Germany, the voice of some radical parties are much stronger. It's a little bit troubling, and unfortunately, it has to do again with the same problem that in the last few months or the past 2 years, the pandemic had an incredible effect on the increase of certain tendencies in the society. But I would just tell you again what I said in the beginning. I don't think it's a German problem. I think it's a global problem. You have the same problem in London, in England with these tendencies. And we just hope that people somehow on a bigger scale will remain sane and to elect officials and members of the parliament who will still keep some sort of sanity in the middle. This is our only hope. I think that right now the continuation, obviously we are very, very excited of what's going to be the new parliament. We see that there will be a certain change that has not been here for the past 16 years. But we certainly hope that the politics of Germany towards Israel will not change, and also towards the Jewish community will not change. I don't think there will be big changes in these areas, and we really just hope for the best. We also believe that Lev Melech B'Yad Hashem, that the Kadosh Baruch Hu always says the right people in the government. This is our hope.
Let's hope so, absolutely. And finally, there's a lot in the news about Israelis. They seem to be coming to Germany in their droves. I don't know if you have many in Leipzig, but I think in Berlin there's a large community. How many Israelis are there in Germany nowadays, as far as you know? And what's the big attraction of Germany for them?
This is a very, very tough question. I do not know how many, but there are at least numbers, they say, of close to 20,000 young people from Israel relocated to Germany, to Berlin itself. Also, Leipzig has a few hundred Israelis for sure. What could be attractive, especially bigger cities like Berlin and Leipzig included, they're very open. They provide a possibility for education. Many of the Israelis, obviously, through their parents or grandparents, are eligible for citizenship here in Germany. And we have to be very honest. Currently, Germany is one of the leading economies with one of the best social net. So that's definitely, compared to the struggle of the average Israeli young person who is just out of the army and the education. I'm so sorry to say that the economical part I understand. I'm also a little bit sad about the fact that many of these young Israelis come here to run away from Yiddishkeit and from the way they experience Judaism in Israel, it's really sad for me, because they also very often don't want to have anything to do with the Jewish community here. And we also have to actively go in their direction to understand, listen, you're Jewish, we're a Jewish community, you belong here. We're not asking you who you are. We're not asking you to be someone else than you are, but you belong to us. You belong here in this community. So, Baruch Hashem, sometimes we're successful, but there are times when we are not successful in these efforts. It's very hard. At the same time, I have to tell you that sometimes it could also be that maybe Germany is the solution for somebody to come closer back to the roots. We have here a wonderful student who was brought up in a Haredi environment, and but he decided at the age of 19 to cut with that way of life, and at the same time he found his way back to observant Judaism, and he's literally now one of my right hands here in the youth work, and when I'm away to take over the laning in the synagogue and some of the prayer services. Sometimes you have to go far away to reconnect with your roots. So let's hope that we are gonna be here to help, to at least to give the door for those people to reconnect to their roots. It's very important that it is at least my personal take, but I heard this once from a very excellent British rabbi. I don't want to name, because not to maybe I'm not quoting him right, but we do say that we don't do manipulation whenever we want to get Jews back on the track. We believe that our Yiddishkeit is strong. We believe in our traditions. So we're not going to manipulate people with psychological tools. What we will do is open a door and be warm and welcome whoever wishes to come through that door. This is what we do, and we hope that some of the Israelis will find this door when they move here. I don't know if we can do this on greater scales, but we definitely want to provide an open and warm atmosphere for anybody who wishes to enter our synagogues, our events. We're not judgmental. You're a Jew, you belong here, everybody's welcome. Even if a non-Jew wants to come to pray in a synagogue, please, there's no problem with that. So I hope
as
that
we wind down, if you don't mind, if I can just ask you another question, please add anything else you wanted to say. You've achieved so much. You're still a young rabbi. You're committed to your community. You're content there and fulfilled. Are there any dreams that you have that you haven't yet that you still see for the future for yourselves and your family in Germany? Is there something you'd really like to?
This is a very, very, very good question. For that, my only answer is what we actually say every single morning in Uva Letzion, that ואני זויס בריסי, אויסון, אומה, השם, רוחי אשר הולכו, ודבורי אשר שם בפיכו, לא ימושו מפיכו, ומפיזרחו, ומפיזרחו מעטו ועד. This is the only wish that I have, that I will be able to see my children continue on the path of the Torah and warmth of Yiddishkeit, and happy about what they do. This is my only dream that I have, and to be able to continue what we do, that the Kodesh Baruch Hu will give us strength for that. This is my dream. I don't think we have to dream bigger. Just that little haftacha, that little insurance that our children will continue in our ways, and our children's children. That would be my dream.
I think that's a beautiful message to end with everything you've done and all the inspiration and all of the accomplishments you've done. There's other things we haven't mentioned, your publishing and other things that come to mind. But ultimately, what you want for yourself and for your wife is to bring up Jewish children, to give them a Jewish future, a wholesome education. And that's really all you want to do. I think that very much permeates with the people around you, and they feel that. And that's why you're so beloved to them. And I'm pleased to say I've seen it up front so many times. And just thank you once again, Rabbi Zsolt, for joining us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. And I'm sure our viewers are going to have so much to think about and are going to be so inspired by the messages that you've been giving and shared with us tonight. And I wish you and your family only blessing and goodness in all that you achieve, and keep up the strength. Chazak ve'ematz. And I can't wait to see you in the flesh and give you a hug at the right time and very soon, I hope.
That's mutual, Rabbi David. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, and everyone. Thank you, of course, everyone who's been watching, and see you next time. All the best and good night.